Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started with our second part of the seminar. And our next speaker is Matt Anderson. He is a financial officer with First Command. And he's going to walk us through some of the various ins and outs of long-term care, and especially the expenses involved. And with him, via satellite, is Robin Rafe. She is First Command's Director of Long-Term Care. So let's just give a warm welcome to Matt and Robin. Thank you.
Okay, as Marcia said, I'm Matt Anderson. I'm a financial advisor here locally. I work for First Command, which is really an international organization. Our corporate office is located in Fort Worth, Texas, and that's where Robin will be joining us from. I did want to highlight that I am also a colleague of Linda Lanzetto, and we have an office just a couple blocks away here off 2nd Street, and then we've got an office also in Shawnee. I retired from the Army after a 27-year career, and then after I left the Army, I actually was a chief financial officer for 5 years. In terms of the, and in April will be my 4th year with First Command. So kind of how we came into presenting today was Jeanette Labby and Marcia participated in a similar presentation several months ago, and they thought that the information that was presented was very relevant to this group. After listening to the first presentation, I think we're going to hit on some of the similar common themes that you heard from Bessie. And while I make presentations, and this presentation pretty frequently, what I really wanted to do was bring in the most expert person in our company to be able to present from a much broader experience than I could provide, and that's why Robin Rafe will come to you today by teams. So on the table, there are 3 long-term care-related handouts. Those are there for you to take with you. I do have to make one administrative note. Anytime that we, as a financial advisory firm, are presenting information, the regulatory authority associated with the Securities and Exchange Commission, called FINRA, requires us to take attendance of who is here. So if you would please, at the end of this, we've got forms that look like this over on the food table. Please just write your name on that form. And then there are places, if you would like us to reach back out and speak to you about anything that Robin talks about today, you have the opportunity to do that. And if you don't, you can check a box, please do not contact me, and I certainly will not do that. So what I'd really like to do now is introduce our Director of Long-Term Care Solutions, Robin. As I said, she works in our corporate office at Fort Worth, Texas, and in her job, she travels quite frequently. In fact, this week, she made this similar presentation in Houston, Texas, several times and traveled back yesterday so that she was present for us here today. She's held her current position for nearly 12 years and has been at our company for 16 years. And then in terms of once she graduated, she's been in the insurance business for 23 years. So she has seen several different companies. She, as I said, is our expert for First Command on anything that has to do with long-term care. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to her. So, Robin, take it away.
Great. Thank you, Matt. Can you all hear me okay?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yep. Okay, good. Well, so happy to be with you all this morning, even virtually. I hope everything has been super educational and informative. As Matt said, this is something that I've been doing for a long time, but probably like some of you in this room, it's something that I have experienced personally in my family, and I can't tell you that tends to be very, very eye-opening, and I'll share some of that with you this morning. I want to make sure that you all are getting as much information and any questions you have answered, so feel free to ask questions. I'm more than happy to address those throughout the presentation, and we'll save some time towards the end to answer those questions as well. So let's just jump right in. So what we're going to talk about is what in the world is this long-term care stuff, and what are the risks, or how likely is it that I'm going to need care? We'll talk about some kind of average cost of care, both nationally, but then there in the Leavenworth area as well. And then we'll talk about some programs that may or may not help pay for that care and how those work. And then we'll also look at kind of the pros and cons of what we call self-insuring or self-funding, paying for it out of pocket. And then I'll spend a few minutes just talking about long-term care insurance if that's something that you are interested in. So let's jump right in. So what in the world is long-term care? Just the big broad definition is needing care with what we call our basic activities of daily living. It's literally what we do every day when we get up, probably without even thinking about it. So first we get up. That's an activity of daily living. So you can see at the bottom it says transferring. Transferring just means I'm moving. So I got up out of my bed and I moved across the room to a chair or to another room. So that's an activity of daily living. I'm going to bathe. I'm going to get dressed. I'm going to eat breakfast. I'm going to go to the bathroom. Needing assistance with at least 2 of those is considered a long-term care event. And it could be for any reason. It could be just due to aging, but it could be a fall or a stroke. Even cancer sometimes is a reason why people have some limitations to being able to do those activities of daily living. The other side of that is a cognitive impairment. So your Alzheimer's, your dementia. So I use my dad as an example. My dad needed care over an extended period of time, and he could do those activities of daily living when he chose to do them. Sometimes he needed a little motivation, but he could do them. But he still needed care due to mild to moderate dementia. So in some cases it could be an either or in some cases there might be both of those things going on. So who needs care? We're going to look at some statistics here in a couple of slides, but generally as we age, that need increases. So it's like the good news, bad news. The good news is we're living longer lives and we're surviving cancers and strokes and heart attacks, but that's causing us to reach an age where we might not be able to care for ourselves independently. We're not immune to it in our younger years, so accidents, falls, other types of illnesses may impact us in those younger years. My dad spent the last 7 years in a Medicaid facility, and we'll talk more about Medicaid here in a bit, but his last 2 roommates were actually in their 40s. Both of them had traumatic brain injury. I'm not exactly sure of the reason why, but again, we're not immune to it in our younger years. So when we break the risk down between males and females, we females have the greater risk. So you guys tend to do the noble thing and kind of drop dead earlier than we do, and we linger around forever and ever. And so you can see not only do we have the higher risk of needing it, but we tend to need it longer. And so women on average need about 3.7 years, while men on average need about 2.2 years. And I saw that all the time when I would go visit my dad in the nursing facility. He was very popular. There was like 5 guys there and 100 women. So that's just where that risk lies demographically. So where services received? So I think for so many of us, when we think long-term care, the first thing that we think of is a nursing home, or I'll age myself, we called it the old folks home when I was growing up. It very well can be there, but when we actually look at it, by far the majority of care is provided in people's own homes. And it's typically by unpaid family caregivers, right? The spouse, the kids, other loved ones that are all kind of trying to pitch in to help provide that care. But it can also be paid. There can be a home health aide or a homemaker that's helping you, with meal preparation, taking medications, taking you to and from the doctor, maybe just helping you with those activities of daily living. From there, we've got some adult daycare centers. So that's usually like a senior center in the community, and it's somewhere you can go for the day, interact, engage with other people, and then go home in the evening, whether it's to your home or to a loved one's home. We've got assisted living facility. My dad was in assisted living for a number of years. You have like your own apartment with your own things, but you've got people that are providing 3 meals a day, maybe helping you with that medication management, maybe helping you with those activities of daily living. He loved it. I think he thought he was back at the frat house. He was like playing pool and winning money and just having a grand old time. Unfortunately, his health declined and he had to move into a nursing facility, which typically comes in play in one of two scenarios. Either if you need really hands-on skilled care, kind of 24/7, or if you're on Medicaid. And for my dad, it was actually both of those. And then lastly, hospice, which is really just about making that person comfortable in that end of life stage. So what do the numbers show? So on the left-hand side, this is obviously a blended male-female statistic, but 70% of us over the age of 65 are gonna need some type of long-term care at some point in our lifetime. So that just means, statistically speaking, if I make it to 65, there's a pretty good chance that I'm probably gonna need some type of long-term care at some point in my life. So the middle number, what this looks at, is an average length of long-term care lasting longer than a year. So the averages make me a little bit crazy because you might have somebody that falls and maybe breaks their hip, they might need some rehab, some physical therapy, but they get better. And then you have somebody on the other end of the spectrum that may need care for a number of years. And so what this statistic is saying is, let's not look at the ones less than a year. We're gonna assume that either that person recovered from that or they passed from that condition. And then that's that 3.9 years. The longer ones are those cognitive. So you can see an average life expectancy after an Alzheimer's diagnosis ranges between 8 and 10 years. My dad didn't have Alzheimer's, he had dementia, but his was 15 years. So those could be really, really long because your body is still going. It's just that you can't care for yourself because you don't have the mental capacity to be able to do that. Okay, so the cost of care. So what we're looking at here is national averages. So the cost of care varies depending on where you live in the country and the type of care that you're receiving, just like anything, right? Just like housing and stuff like that. So this comes to us, and I think Matt shared this with you all, this comes to us from the Genworth cost of care. You can go there directly. They actually partner with another company called Care Scout. As a matter of fact, I think they just acquired that company. Really good information out there. You can see genworth.com/cost of care, or you can go to carescout.com and look up average cost in your area. The Care Scout website even has a lot of resources for families looking for care. So, you know, facilities, home health agencies, stuff like that. So it's a great resource. But you can see home care here is averaging nationally between $5,700 to $6,300 a month. Something important to point out with home care is home health aides are paid hourly. And so what populates here is an average of 44 hours a week. If they were receiving care more than 44 hours a week, obviously it would be more expensive, and vice versa if it was less than that. One of my advisors in Colorado called me a couple months ago, and she said, Robin, this website is broken. It's not correct. And I said, well, tell me what you mean by that. And she said, I have a client that's receiving care in his own home, and it's costing him $25,000 a month. And so I started asking some questions. Well, how much home care is he receiving? Well, he's receiving 24/7. And so when we backed into the hourly rate, the website was correct. It was just that he was receiving it 24/7. And I said, Sandy, he would really be better off going into a facility. It would be less expensive. And she said, I know, but he doesn't want to be in a facility, and I completely get that. I don't want to either. I want to be at home with my dogs. Fortunately, that particular person had long-term care insurance that was paying $15,000 a month for his care, so at least he wasn't draining the whole $25,000 out of pocket each month. Assisted living typically is a little bit less, so we're averaging about $5,300 a month for assisted living. Nursing home is typically going to be the most expensive because of the skilled nature of it. So meaning you've got to have more people on staff that have some type of medical training. So we're averaging, a semi-private room is averaging about $8,700 a month. A private room is averaging about $9,700 a month. So I looked up Leavenworth on this tool. It actually, what populates is Lawrence, Kansas. I'm not sure how close that is to you guys, but that's what it populates. Home care for that 44 hours a week is averaging $5,340 for both homemaker and home health aid services. Assisted living was higher. It's averaging $8,300 a month. And then nursing home was averaging $9,400 for a semi-private room and $11,100 for a private room. Usually when I see costs that kind of spike for different types of care in a particular area, that is a supply and demand thing. So there may not be as many assisted living facilities or nursing facilities in that community. And so that causes that rate to spike a little bit.
Hey, Robin, I will pull up the Genworth cost of care. I will pull up the cost of care once you're complete. We generally are using Kansas City. So just off the top of my head, because Linda and I do this all the time, home health care in Kansas City, which Leavenworth would fall into that geographic area, is about $6,673 a month for the 40 hours a week of care. But I've got the website. We can pull that up once Robin is complete.
Are you going to project that for like an Alzheimer's?
Robin, I believe, is going to cover the Alzheimer's. We specifically talked about that because I knew that was something you wanted us to cover.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. So anytime we're looking at some type of memory care, an Alzheimer's or something like that, that is going to tack on extra. And so these costs right here, these nursing home costs, that is not for memory care. So you can usually add on another $2,000 to $3,000 a month for some type of memory care. And there's different levels, if you will, of memory care. So you may have some people, like my dad, who had the mild to moderate dementia, but he still knew who he was. He could still have a conversation. That was not necessarily an extra expense. But when you get to the level of an Alzheimer's, where that person is probably needing some coaching and some prompting, even just to eat, that's going to be a lot more expensive. So like I said, you can tack on about $2,000 to $3,000 more a month for that. All right, good questions. Thank you. So the future cost of care, I don't think anybody is surprised to know that we anticipate the future cost of care to continue to increase. So we are projecting annual cost of long-term care by 2030, which is just around the corner, of $140,000 a year. I actually think that's fairly conservative because you may have heard of these 78 million baby boomers that are moving into retirement. Our oldest boomers are turning 80 next year, and so we are going to have a bit of a crisis. I heard a speaker a few months ago, he spoke of the silver tsunami that we have coming. That is going to put a real strain on these systems. We are going to have more people that need care than we actually have care providers and resources. So I think that is going to continue to increase that cost even more than what we're looking at. A projected cost of a 3 to 5 year care event, again, using just the numbers of what it's been doing over the last several years, could be anywhere between $600,000 to $1 million. So, 70% of us are going to need it, and it's just pretty gosh darn expensive, which is why it's so important that we're planning for this in our life. So let's talk about some programs and how those work. So the first is like your health insurance. So I'm not talking about Medicare. I'll talk about Medicare separately. Your health insurance, so for those of us that are under the age of 65 typically, whether it's something that you have through your company or through the government or a policy that you own individually, that's designed to pay for what we call acute care. And acute care means I'm going to get better. I'm going to recover from it. Well, that's not long-term care. Long-term care typically is chronic. And that means I might show some improvement here and there, but I'm not going to just wake up and not have that condition anymore. We're going to just kind of manage that condition. Your health insurance was not designed to pay for it. So I'll give you an example. Let's say I fell and I broke my hip and I needed surgery and I needed some rehab and I needed some physical therapy. My health insurance could pay for that. But at some point they're like, we're done because they aren't planning to pay for a long-term chronic condition. Disability insurance. So if you have disability, again, through the government, individually, through your company, that's designed to reimburse a percentage of your income if you're not able to work. So, for example, if I became disabled and I couldn't work, I still have a mortgage and utilities and groceries and just regular expenses. A disability insurance policy would reimburse me a percentage of my income so I could just continue to meet those financial demands. It doesn't pay that extra or additional cost for long-term care like the numbers we were just looking at. Okay, Medicare, and I'm going to pop up Medicaid there too because people get those programs confused. The Congress that named those programs in 1965 has confused everybody, and people go, I'm on Medicare, I'm on Medicaid. So Medicare, the key word in there is care, and that's the health care program for most of us at the age of 65 and older. And you've got like Part A that pays hospital, Part B that pays outpatient or physician. You've got drug plans and supplement plans to kind of fill in the gap. When we talk about Medicare, we really have to rewind the clock to 1965 when these programs were established. Our average life expectancy was like in our late 60s. So we weren't reaching these ages where we weren't able to care for ourselves independently. And so they weren't even thinking about long-term care. So what Medicare will cover is a portion of up to 100 days of skilled care. And they're very, very specific about it being skilled care. It's got to follow an at least 3-day hospital stay. When we look at long-term care, the majority of it is actually not skilled care. The majority of it is what we call custodial, helping you with those activities of daily living, helping you, prepare meals and manage your medications. And Medicare will not pay for that. So skilled care, the nature of skilled care is it's provided by somebody with medical training, a nurse, a physical therapist. I'll give you an example. I'll share a story real quick about my mom with you. So my mom just turned 80 in December, and she's still very active, very healthy. She just retired as a school teacher a couple years ago. But about 10 years ago, she was taking the trash and the recycle out to the alley at night, and she somehow got crossways with it, and she fell and she hit her head on a rock. And she was out for some period of time. We don't know how long because she lived alone. But thankfully she came to, and she did go to the hospital. She was in the hospital for those 3 days, and she needed help with many of those activities of daily living. And so I moved her in with me, and thank God she has an amazing support system of friends and other teachers that she worked with, people from church, family, that literally took shifts to help care for her so I could continue working. I put one of those lock boxes on my front door, like when you're trying to sell your house, so that people could just, let themselves in and out and take a shift. And she recovered and she's fine now. But I know this stuff. You feel desperate in these scenarios. And I reached out to her doctor and I said, well, what about Medicare? Can't Medicare pay for anything? And her doctor said, no, because she doesn't need skilled care. And my response was, well, can't you just maybe say that she needs skilled care so we can get something? And she's like, yeah, that's fraud. And no, I can't do that. So thank God we made it through and she's fine now. But that's kind of how Medicare works. So it can help if you need skilled care, but they cap it at 100 days. So at that point, you either have to start paying out of pocket or have some type of insurance, or your family's got to provide that care. Medicaid, excuse me, I hit that button too fast. Medicaid, on the other hand, the key word in there is aid, and that is the healthcare program for the indigent, people with limited assets and limited income. This is what my father ended up on. So Medicaid is paid with both federal and state dollars. So the federal government has kind of like overreaching guidelines that every state has to comply with. But then it's up to each state how they want to implement that. So you can have variation from state to state. One thing that's consistent is you have to have minimal assets, countable assets. What they consider countable assets is anything that you can use to pay for your care. So your savings, your investments, IRAs, Roth, all of those things. Even the cash value of life insurance is considered a countable asset under Medicaid because you can access it and use it to pay for your care. So in all states, if it's an individual, you can have no more than $2,000 in assets to apply for Medicaid or to be approved by Medicaid. If there's a couple and both are applying, you can have no more than $3,000 in assets. When we first applied for Medicaid with my dad, I had a whopping $7,000 whole life policy on him, and that disqualified him for Medicaid. So we had to spend down that cash value to the $2,000 in order to get him qualified. If your income is over a certain level, that can disqualify you for long-term care. So there's a lot of states that have income cap states. Kansas is not one of those states. So in some, like where I am in Texas, if you make over $2,600 a month, you will not qualify for Medicaid. In Kansas, you have to pay all of your income less, I think what I saw was $63 a month that you could keep. So you have to pay all of your income to the facility. And then if there's a shortage, meaning that there's extra that you still owe, Medicaid would pay that amount. Oh, excuse me. So the $63 a month is, for paying for, toothpaste and deodorant and, things like that you need personally for personal care. Something to be mindful of is a lot of people try to transfer their assets so that they could qualify for implemented a 5-year look-back period. And so when you apply for Medicaid, you have to provide 5 years of your financial records. And if you have transferred any assets within that 5 years, it creates a penalty period for Medicaid. So for example, if I apply for Medicaid and I have transferred assets, let's say I transferred $100,000, excuse me, within the last 5 years to my children, they're going to look at it, they're going to see it, and they're going to say, okay, and your zip code, $100,000 would have paid for 22 months of long-term care or whatever that amount is. And so I would be ineligible for Medicaid for that period of time. So it creates a penalty period. There's also estate recovery. So we talked about countable assets. There's also non-countable assets. So when you apply for Medicaid, you're able to keep your primary residence and the stuff in your residence and one vehicle. And the reason is, if you get better, you want to have a place to go. So they're not going to make you get rid of your home. However, when you pass away, they place a lien on your estate so they can recoup those costs. So my father passed away about 1.5 years ago, which was completely a blessing. He was like ready to go. He would look at me and go, I don't know why I'm still here. And I would say, I don't know either, but you've got to take a shower. So he kept his sense of humor all the way to the end, thank God, which was wonderful. But 2 months after he passed, I received a letter from Medicaid, and it said William Rafe was on Medicaid from this date to this date, and his estate owes us $350,000. Well, in his scenario, there was no estate. There was no home. There was no things in the home. There was no vehicle. So I was like, there's nothing. Good luck. And so they do write it off if there's no estate, but they do their best to recoup it if there is an estate to recoup from. So kind of the final word on Medicaid, it's a program of last resort.
Robin, just a second. We have a question.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Yep.
If there's a spouse or somebody living in the home when that person dies,
They won't kick them out,
put on residence?
but when they pass away or if they sell the home, then they're going to try to recoup their cost at that time.
Any other questions? Okay, Robin, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, no, thank you. Okay, so kind of the final word of Medicaid, it's a program of last resort with people with limited assets, limited income. I was grateful that we had it for my dad. I did not love it for him. He did not love it. I wished we had something different for him, but that was really the only option at that point for him. As Matt said earlier, we work very heavily in the military community, and so this bullet is geared towards them. Oh, excuse me, I need to take some allergy medicine. If you have military retirement or some other type of pension, that would likely disqualify you. And then hopefully if you've been socking away some, assets for retirement, you would not meet that, income threshold for Medicaid.
Hey, Robin, I had one question just to clarify.
Sure.
So Social Security, is that included in
Yes.
is that the limit of the $2,600 per month?
Yes, that is. Yes, so your Social Security is considered income. Any other type of pension, like if you have military retirement, even VA disability, we have a lot of clients that get VA disability. That's not taxed, but under Medicaid, it's considered income. So you would have to pay that to the facility, and only if there was a shortage would Medicaid pay that difference.
Thanks, Robin.
Okay, sure. So veterans benefits, of course, we have a lot of veterans. So the way that the VA works is it's based on priority groups, and the priority groups are based on your percentage of service-connected disability and also your income. What I hear, I get mixed feedback. As Matt said, I travel all throughout the country, and some people will tell me, the VA in this area is okay. Some people will say it's not that great. But what I hear pretty consistently is that there's long waiting lists for beds. So it's where do you fall in that priority group, and where is there a bed available within your state? You obviously have to have a clinical need for the services. It's also just for the veteran. It's not for a spouse if they are not also a veteran. Even if you do get a bed, it's not necessarily 100% covered. So in some levels of care, such as assisted living or adult family homes, you still have to pay that room and board, which is actually usually the majority of the cost. This slide here, this is just a screenshot of the VA. If you are a veteran, this is a great resource to look at. It's va.gov/geriatrics. And you can click through here. You can even see what facilities are in your area. I highlighted here where they say they don't pay for the room and board in assisted living or adult family homes. Also, where it says it's going to be based on your service-connected status, level of disability, and income. So it's definitely, it can help. We just don't have enough VA facilities to handle all of the veterans. We've got 16.3 million veterans in the country today, and we don't have anywhere close to that in terms of beds. So we typically will encourage our veterans to have some type of backup plan in case they are on a really long waiting list or aren't able to get a bed. So family care, people tell me all the time, my family's going to care for me, and my answer to that is yes, absolutely. I think for almost all of us, our kids, our spouse, our other loved ones are going to do everything they possibly can to care for you. I would just say, give it some thought. What does that look like? Geography, do they live close? Do they work? Do they have kids? With my dad, I work, and there was no way that I could be his primary caregiver. I was very involved. I was taking him to the doctor practically there at the end. It seemed like almost every week. But I could not be the person that was caring for him on a day-to-day basis because I have to work. Also, skill sets. So I think we all got a good look at what nursing homes looked like during COVID, which was horrible, frankly. And for a year and a half there, I could only see my dad through a window. And I had a lot of guilt. I really wanted to be able to bring him home. I was worried about not just his physical health, but even his mental health. They were locked in their rooms. They ate in their rooms. They weren't, having social time with other people. But I didn't have the skill set to be able to care for him in my own home. So I wasn't able to do that. Stress, it is stressful. So we looked at earlier the Genworth website that talks about the cost of care. They have a study out there that talks about the cost of caregiving and what does that look like. And it looks like anxiety and depression and guilt and anger and frustration and, just stress. We see substance abuse. We see the health of the caregiver decline along with the person that's receiving the care decline. So it's very, very stressful. You'll see if you go out to that website, 57% of caregivers have children under the age of 18. We call that our sandwich generation. They're sandwiched in between two generations. They're caring for their parents while also trying to care for their children at the same time. So it can be a heavy load, so to speak. So we encourage you to have a plan B. One of the flyers I believe that you should have is the difference between basically being a caregiver versus being a companion. And I can tell you with my dad, even with mild to moderate dementia, he did not want me to be his caregiver. He wanted me to be his buddy. So he wanted me to come and take him out to lunch and take him to the Family Dollar store so he could raid the candy aisle. He did not want me to be his caregiver because in his mind, even in my 40s, I was still daddy's little girl. And so he would be like, okay, I'll see you later. Bye-bye. Anytime you need care, like, okay, get out of here. I'll call you or I'll see you next weekend. So again, we encourage you to have a plan B. So how will you pay? You can use your savings. You might have to sell it at an inopportune time when values are low. I was just reading something right before I jumped into this meeting about how the market has been a little choppy lately with the tariffs and stuff that, that our market is very sensitive to things like that. I always think of 2008 when I look at that bullet when we didn't know what in the heck was going on. It was like the world was crashing. You could obviously exhaust funds intended for other goals. Selling assets is likely to trigger taxes, and I'm going to show you that on the next slide. And we want you to be mindful. So if you increase your taxable income in a given year, that could result in you having to pay a higher Medicare Part B premium, because that Part B premium is means tested. So if your income is at a higher level, then you end up paying a higher premium. So that's the premise of this slide. So this is showing you your self-insuring or your self-funding, self-paying for long-term care. So the premise of this slide is I need $100,000 to pay for my care. And 3 buckets that I can pull from. My first bucket is my tax deferred bucket. And that's going to be like my 401k.
It is? Okay. Yep, there we go. So about a third of the group here is our veterans, and we do have a VA hospital right here in Leavenworth. We've got one in Kansas City and then one in Topeka, which is about 45 minutes away. But just because you live in Leavenworth doesn't mean that you would actually get to be in the hospital here in Leavenworth. Can you take just a couple seconds and talk about how that would work?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so it goes back to, where do you fall in those priority groups and where is there a bed available in your state? So it very well could not be in your community. A very good friend of mine, I was talking to him a couple months ago, and his mother had been caring for his stepdad who had pretty late stage Alzheimer's. He really doesn't know much of anything. And of course it was very hard on his mom. And my friend said, I've got to go talk to my mom and convince her that moving him to a VA facility that's 4 hours away and still costs $3,500 a month is not losing. And so it was so hard for her, for one, to let go of the caregiving duty. She felt like she was failing as a spouse. But then add on top of that, it was 4 hours away. Like, that was a very hard emotional decision. So, Matt, to your point, it's not necessarily in your community. It's just, where do you fall on that list and where is the next bed going to open up in your state?
Okay, thank you. The last question I have, and then we'll open it up to the room. When you use the options, and the slide specifically that you were used is traditional versus hybrid, and then we talked about being underwritten for morbidity with long-term care insurance. I know we have options, and we won't go into great detail, but I just wanted the group to hear from you as our Director of Long-Term Care Solutions is, what happens if I don't get approved for a long-term care insurance? Do we have other options as well?
Yeah, sure. So pulling on that thread a little bit. So we right now work with 4 different companies. We do offer both traditional and we do offer hybrid as well. And different companies take different risks in different areas. So I brought up Nationwide. Nationwide is a great company. Nationwide is not good with PTSD. For whatever reason, that makes them nervous. And so I have a different company that's absolutely fine with PTSD, One America. So a lot of times what we encourage people to do is what we call an underwriting pre-screen, which is just a link that you would click on. It's anonymous. You answer health questions. It's what I would call a SMART form. So let's say I answered, yes, I've had cancer. It's going to open up some more questions, and it's going to say, what was the date of diagnosis? What stage was it? How was it treated? And that anonymously goes to our carriers, and then they can come back and say, yes, we would consider you, or no, we wouldn't consider you. If you're completely uninsurable on the insurance side, that's where we can gravitate to an annuity, because an annuity is not medically underwritten. So we've got annuities that have long-term care doublers, basically. And so the nature of an annuity, they can do a lot of different things, but one of the things an annuity does is it provides a stream of income. And this long-term care annuity would basically double that income if you needed care. So it would give you the means to be able to provide that care. So we have a lot of different solutions depending on that person's circumstances.
Perfect, thank you. All right, so Marcia's got
I have 2 questions.
2 questions.
Actually.
Can you
first
hear her,
one-
Robin?
The first one is,
Yeah.
I'm in a facility, Shady Pines, and it's the top-notch facility. I love it there, and then I spend down all my money, and I'm going to have to go on Medicaid. Can Shady Pines kick me out of that facility because I am now Medicaid and force me to go into a facility not of my choosing because I don't have the money anymore?
Yes.
They can
Yeah.
kick me out. Okay.
That was that story I was telling you about the 2 brothers with their
Okay.
mom with the Alzheimer's. She was in a very, very nice facility. Her long-term care insurance was paying for it. Then her assets were paying for it. and then she had nothing, and so she's had to move to a Medicaid facility.
Okay.
So not all facilities accept Medicaid.
Okay. The second question is there a cutoff date in age where I can no longer buy long-term care insurance because I now have reached that limit in my age?
Sure, yeah. So it varies a little bit by the carrier that we work with, but most of them, the cutoff is like age 79. I think one of them's age 75. Sometimes it's just pretty darn expensive because the premium is based on your age when you apply for it. So I was working with a couple earlier this week that they were both in their 70s, and the premium it still provides leverage, but the premium was just a little bit on the high end for them. So what we end up doing in that situation is backing down the coverage a little bit. Another thing to consider, obviously, is the underwriting, because just the nature of it, right? As we age, we just start to have stuff, you know? And so that can preclude you from getting it. But I know at least one carrier and maybe a couple of them, you can get it up to the age of 79.
Robin, Matt. So I'll just share my parents. My dad is now 82, my mom's 81, and as I stated up front, I've only been a financial advisor for 4 years, and they became my clients a couple years into my business, but I was able to get my mom into a long-term care policy, which was very important to my dad, that we do that, and she was 80 at the time that we got her into that policy. My dad, a year older, actually didn't meet the underwriting requirements or criteria, and then that's where we worked for an annuity to make sure that he had the care. So that's why I wanted Robin to address. There are lots of different ways, and then we've even got, and going back to the tax-free bucket that she talked about, we can leverage other types of things to, while it's not necessarily insurance, create the income to pay for the costs associated and try to pull that from a tax-free type of investment where you're not having to actually pay the taxes on top of the money that you're doing, and it's not impacting, Robin talked about impacting the Medicare Part B premium, but there's also a potential impact on your Social Security payment as well if it's coming out of the wrong income bucket. What other questions do we have? Yes, ma'am.
I have a really off-the-wall question. On your hybrid policies with the life insurance, many life insurances exclude suicide. So if a person were to be diagnosed with a terminal illness and decide to go to Oregon and do an assisted suicide, would the life insurance policies refuse to pay?
Did you hear that, Robin?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a good question. Yes, I think that I would want to double check before I gave you a 100% answer, but I'm pretty sure all of the companies that we work with exclude suicide because that's a common exclusion. Now, one of the things that we see with a lot of life insurance is there's a time frame. So a lot of times if the suicide is after you have had the policy for at least 2 years, that would not be excluded. But I would want to look in that fine print to make sure I was giving you, the 100% answer for that particular policy.
I've had long-term health care for a long time, so that means I have an older policy. Is it like that you can change that maybe to a more different kind of policy that better fits your needs at this point in time, or are you just kind of stuck with the one that you started out with?
Robin, did you hear that?
I did
Yep,
hear that. Yeah, so a couple things. So I'm guessing it's a traditional long-term care policy like what I have.
Right.
So there's no cash value with traditional long-term care, so you can't do what we would call a 1035 exchange, where you can take that cash value and put it into a different type of policy. If it's traditional. If it was hybrid, you could do something like that. Or if you had life insurance with cash value, you could take that life insurance and 1035 it, exchange it into a life insurance with a long-term care rider. What some people have done with the traditional long-term care is basically reduce their coverage or done like a reduced paid up and took out a supplement policy, for example. So like my policy is reimbursement, but I want to take out a smaller supplement cash policy so that I have that ability to receive the cash if I wanted to pay a family member. So there's different ways that we can address that. The other thing I would say though is if you've had that policy for a long time, because it's based on your age when you apply, odds are a newer policy now, whether it's been 10 years or 15 years or whatever it is going to be more expensive because you're now that amount of time older. So those are things that we can help you evaluate and look at it. A lot of times when I look at older policies, I'm like, you probably should just keep it because it would be so expensive to replace it. But we're happy to help you with that if you'd like to look at it.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions?
You've done good.
Very good.
Robin, there are no questions from here. What I will do is once you sign off, I'll just pull up the Genworth website and show that. But last time before Robin zooms back to Texas real quick, any other questions for her? No? All right. Robin, thanks so much. It was a wonderful presentation.
Thank you, Robin.
Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful day. Take care.
So I know we're about 5 minutes over time here, and if please do. But in terms of the cost,
He said that it was the best.
in terms of the cost, this is the Care Scout website that Robin mentioned, and if I plug in, I'll just type in Leavenworth, Kansas here. Just a second. Just how often this is updated is a perfect example, because when I was running this last week, if I typed in Leavenworth, it shot to Kansas City. And then when I typed it in here, just as Robin had talked about, it did pull up Lawrence. So, and then in terms of, I told you that we, for the last about 6 to 7 months, have been using a factor of $6,673 a month for somebody to come into your home 40 to 44 hours a week. We can see that just dropped. And the really great thing about this that I wanted to show you is, I'll just use me. I'm 59 years old, and so at the year of 2025, which we're in, and if I fast forward to when I'm 80 years old, the 22 years, then that is now inflating that cost to the age of 80, which is when I typically, if I'm the average American male, would need that coverage. And you can see that projects that cost for you specifically, and then you can kind of play around with the inflation cost. We just ran 3%, that's 4%, and you can see the numbers change. So in terms of if you want to go someplace where you can just check things out for yourself, this is a great website. Again, there are the 3 different handouts on the table. The care or companionship, this trifold, and then kind of what you need to know about the different types of long-term care insurance that Robin covered. Is there anything else that you want us to hit, Marcia?
I'm going to put Doug on the spot here. He gave me permission to ask. Alice is in long-term care at Twin Oaks. Tell them what you're paying a month.
$13,300.
$13,300 a month.
Skilled nursing.
Yeah, and so that's to the point that Robin talked about. That's what Linda and I do every day is the solution for your plan might not be insurance, but we want to make sure that we're addressing and that there is a plan. It could be, yeah, I'm going to pay for that out of pocket. I'm going to have a family member provide that care. We just want to make sure that there's a plan and that everybody's on board. Tom, you had a question?
Well, I just throw out the point that we were told several years ago, of course, by a manager of an assisted living facility that your mother needs to move to a nursing home facility. And the reason for that was that the state of Tennessee, where it was located, requires an annual fire drill, and everyone must clear out under their own capability, mobility-wise, within 20 to 30 minutes. This is about the second time she had not made that. And so they said, you've got, now, only thing I'm trying to point out here is, it'd be amazing how sometimes the state requirements all of a sudden pop up their mean heads in this sort of thing and make you realize, oh boy, now we're going to have to think about another facility. Yes.
The only last point I have is thank you for providing the information. That will keep me from losing my licenses in the states I'm licensed in. You can just leave them on the table, and either Linda or I will come pick those up. But thank you for giving us an hour and 15 minutes of time on Saturday morning. I hope that this hit the mark. And if you have questions, I'll remain behind. And since Linda's a church member, she knows in our office that I'm one of 12. Actually, we just added 2 new advisors here, so now we've got 13 advisors in our local office here. So, Marcia, thanks for giving us the opportunity.
Thank you, Matt. And I believe that